It's a great pleasure to have you all here today, and thank you for attending such an important presentation. Allow me first, please, to introduce Mr. Tamer. And actually, I was reading his bio, and it's an impressive one. Engineer Tamer has an engineering background in civil and architectural engineering, holding a Master of Science degree with over 22 years of experience in Egypt and Middle East. He's for sure a chartered engineer in civil engineering, as well as project management by Engineers Australia. He's registered in Australia's National Engineering Register for both civil engineering and project management. He's also certified project management professional from Project Management Institute in USA. Again, as I mentioned, he has really an impressive career. He led multidisciplinary design and construction teams in the field of building roads and infrastructure, and has been here in Qatar for since 2005, working with Ashghal, where he managed a significant number of projects. You can name it, like mega infrastructure projects and other type of expressways and local roads. He also contributed to the flood prevention scheme and FIFA readiness project in preparation to the Qatar FIFA World Cup 2022. Engineer Tamer contributions to EA, Engineers Australia Qatar chapter, has been pivotal to the chapter's success and growth, with remarkable efforts to support its members to gain international recognition within his capacity as a president, for sure, of Qatar chapter. So, Engineer Tamer, the floor is yours. Please feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Engineer Yasser, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamer Naguib, President of Engineers Australia Qatar chapter, and I'm privileged to be with you in tonight's event. To start with, I would like to thank you all for making the time to attend this awareness session, in which we are going to talk about the process of how to become a member of Engineers Australia, and also the steps towards being recognized with the global credential of a chartered engineer. A special thanks goes to the Syrian Engineers Association in Qatar, who has organized this webinar as part of our continuous collaboration together. To give you a brief introduction about Engineers Australia and the Qatar chapter, Engineers Australia is Australia's peak engineering body. Founded in 1919, the Institution of Engineers Australia has underpinned the progress of the engineering profession for more than a century, and has more than 115,000 individual members in more than 120 countries all over the world. Engineers Australia Qatar chapter was established in 2015. Since then, we have been successfully operating in Qatar for the past 7 years. Engineers Australia Qatar chapter is dedicated to promoting the engineering profession in Qatar. We are supporting EA members in their continuous professional development and in attaining professional credentials. We are also continuously engaging with the wider engineering community to advance the science and practice of engineering for the benefit of the society through organizing technical talks, panel discussions, awareness sessions, industry roundtables, thought leadership forums, and much more. I don't want to take much time, but if you want to know more about Engineers Australia Qatar chapter activities and coming events, please follow our social media accounts on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Once again, thank you for being with us tonight, and I will hand it over back to you, Dr. Yas.
Thank you very much, Engineer Tamer, for this informative information. I would like actually now to introduce our speaker for tonight's lecture. It's actually another impressive career and bio, where Engineer Tamer is the president of Qatar chapters. Please allow me to introduce Mr. Astley Pung. He's the Regional Business Development Manager of Engineers Australia. He's based in Leeds in UK and has responsibility for international member engagement activities and in promoting Engineers Australia as the peak engineering body from Australia. Astley provides support to all international members and the chapters in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Qatar, and UAE and UK. He engages with all levels of stakeholders, from members to industry, academia to government, in strengthening Engineers Australia's offering internationally. Astley's background includes strategic planning, policy and standards, learning and training, besides business and market development activities. His role includes the implementation of the strategic plan of Engineers Australia and to develop collaboration partners to better serve the members and industry. Astley, the floor is yours, and thank you very much in advance for your talk.
Thank you, Dr. Astley. Very good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking time to come and listen to tonight's sharing, which is going to be talking about Engineers Australia membership, as well as how the pathway to become chartered. So let me first start by quickly sharing the slides for tonight. Okay. All right, I hope you all can see the presentation. Okay.
Yeah, it's visible.
All right, great. Just a minute. Okay. Oops. I seem to lost my screen now. All right, no worries. Okay. First and foremost, my name is Astley. I'm the Regional Business Development Manager. I am based in Leeds, UK. My role basically is to look after all the member engagement, and as well as looking after how we can better engage with the engineering fraternity and the community all over the world. So I'm going to be sharing, like I said earlier on, about the pathway, about becoming chartered. But before that, I want to share a bit about Engineers Australia membership, because chartered is a member's benefit. So you have to be a member of Engineers Australia before you can proceed to become a on the chartered pathway. So I'm sure most of you here, or all of you, in fact, are engineers. Looking at the vast majority of you, I'm pretty sure you all have a very vivid and experienced background in engineering, practicing as a competent engineer. So engineers build the world around us, and what we want to do here is to introduce to you about what we do at Engineers Australia. So who we are. So at Engineers Australia, engineering is our world. With a history dating back more than 100 years, being the peak body from Australia, we work hard to advocate for the engineering field locally as well as on the global stage. As a non-profit organization, we exist solely for the benefit of our members, and it's our vision to promote the work that we do for the benefit of all communities. So last year alone, nearly 10,000 members joined Engineers Australia as members, adding to our network of around 115,000 members to date. So at Engineers Australia, we lobby on your behalf in communities, in media, and of course with the government of Australia, as well as other government bodies around the world. As the trusted voice of the profession, we are here to protect the profession and advocate for the industry by driving as well as consulting on policy that impacts engineering in all fields. We are also the accrediting authority for tertiary education or tertiary engineering education in Australia. This allows us to be signatories to the International Engineering Alliance. So in short, what happens is that most of the universities' engineering program in Australia is being accredited by Engineers Australia. So for our members, what do we offer? We offer access to the most extensive training and development opportunities available to engineers. We constantly update on what is happening in the engineering world, as well as we provide countless ways to connect, get involved, have a say, and to raise your profile. So how does your membership contribute towards the work that we do? The funds that we receive from memberships go straight back into advancing the engineering profession in Australia and across the world, from ensuring that the courses are accredited to a high standard, to advocating for engineers with all 3 tiers of government, in delivering STEM workshops to bring the bright young minds to see the possibilities of a career in engineering. I'm sure that the challenge that most of the world is facing today is how to attract the young generation to take up STEM, because there is, believe it or not, a shortage of future engineers based on the statistics that we are seeing today. So everything we do at Engineers Australia in terms of our activities, our engagement, and what we deliver centers around the 3 pillars of learn, connect, and grow. If and as a member of Engineers Australia, you can expect to achieve these 3 complete outcomes and grow your career in ways that you may have never thought possible. So let's look at the first pillar of learn. Membership with Engineers Australia gives you access to a huge collection of highly relevant resources where you can read, watch, or listen to the latest engineering content anytime, anywhere. Join our live and in-person events, live stream webinars, or stream conferences and presentations through our EA On Demand channel platform, which is what we call or term the engineering Netflix in Australia. Read exclusive conference papers, listen to interviews with some of the world's most innovative engineers, and learn about their incredible projects through our Engineering Hero podcast, and maybe even be our next guest. Access our extensive library services that are offered free for our members and include a librarian to help you find the resources that you need for any of your knowledge and projects requirements. Through our various channels, there are unlimited potential to develop yourself personally and professionally. So this includes access to Engineering Education Australia, our wholly owned subsidiary that looks after the professional learning for engineers. Now let's look at let's look at the numerous resources that we have available. As a recap, we have access to conference proceedings, peer-reviewed journals, online bookshops. We publish as well as create white papers on data and trends that is relevant to the latest technology as well as the latest engineering innovation. So you can never know where the best ideas will come from next. So that is our pillar on learn. Now let's look at the second pillar, which is on connect. Engineers Australia is open to all engineers, no matter what type of engineering you are engaged in, because we cater to all disciplines and all facets of engineering. Engineers Australia also represents the whole engineering team, may it be from associates, technologists, as well as professional engineers. In addition to connecting and networking at our face-to-face events, connection also happens through our various platforms, such as EA's Jobs Board, which is a platform that's focused for students and graduate members, those starting off in their earlier career, to give them a way to connect with employers for their first or maybe their second job opportunities. Another platform that is available for our members to utilize is our platform called EA Exchange. Through EA Exchange, you can connect with others in your field, exchange ideas, share resources, and contribute to papers which shape the engineering profession, not only just in Australia, but across the globe. For members who become chartered engineers, you are connected globally through our international agreements and mutual recognition. For Qatar itself, we have got a recognition, reciprocal recognition with the MME, which is the Ministry of Municipality and Environment, which basically recognizes engineers Australia's chartered credentials to be a pathway for registration in Qatar, which we will talk about it more a little further on. So that's the connect pillar. And the third pillar that we want to focus now is on grow. We are with you every step of your career. As you advance from a student to becoming a registered and chartered engineer, we give you the framework to assist you and your team's development as you progress through your career. So through the various stages, as you can see, whether it be as a student, a graduate, a member, or a fellow, you also have got the credentials and the accreditations that you can achieve along the way, such as NER, Chartered, APAC Engineer, International, PE, or even Engineering Executive. And using your post nominals that you have earned, which are exclusive to Engineers Australia members, to build recognition and respect. You can see there are 3 post nominals over there on the screen, which is AMIOS, TMIOS, as well as MIOS. There are some differences, which I will explain later on. So just to recap, the opportunities are endless, and as a member, everything you need is right at your fingertips. When you join Engineers Australia, you can definitely advance your reputation and career, be locally as well as globally recognized. You have peer support and networking, professional as well as personal development. You will have access to thought leadership forums, or even be a guest on as one of the panelists. You of course have access to news and events, and you enjoy numerous other benefits such as member discounts on the engineering education programs that we offer. So the membership categories that we have is looking at the occupational categories. So occupational categories is looking at basically based on your qualifications that you have attained from your university. So we have got engineering associate, engineering technologist, and professional engineer. Now remember 2 slides back when I show you the difference between AMIOS, TMIOS, as well as MIOS. So what does that differentiate? It signifies the different occupational categories that is based on your qualifications that you've attained from the university. So as an engineering associate, you will have the post nominals of AMIOS. As an engineering technologist, you will have the qualification, the post nominals of TMIOS, as well as a professional engineer, your membership occupational category will give you the post nominals of MIOS. So what's the difference between all this? You can join us. You can join us as a member at any stage of your career, and there are 3 ways that we look at the qualifications that are required to be a member. The first one is whether you have completed an Australian qualification that we have accredited. So that's a very straightforward pathway. If you have completed an Australian qualification from the university, an engineering qualification, then basically you are at the first pathway, which is the accredited qualification. The second pathway is through completion of a qualification that is recognized under the relevant international accord, such as the Washington, Sydney, or Dublin Accord. So the Washington Accord is what we term as a 4-year professional engineering degree. The Sydney Accord is looking at the 3 years qualification, whereas the Dublin Accord looks at the 2 years qualification. So that is why if you have a 2 years qualification, engineering qualification, you will then be accepted as an associate member. A 3-year qualification, you will become a technologist. And of course, if you have a 4-year or more qualification, you will be accepted as at the professional engineering level. Now, if you don't have all those, that's not the end of the world. The third pathway is what we call a direct assessment, which is called either a migration skill assessment or a stage 1 competency assessment if you do not have either a accredited qualification or an international accord to become a member of Engineers Australia. So you have to go through an assessment which basically looks at the qualification, the equivalent, English competency, as well as looking at your professional practice. So you may have to write an engineering career episodes to demonstrate your competency as a practicing engineer. So our strict eligibility standards around undergraduate qualifications help us maintain our high standards. So this qualification requirements is not just for Engineers Australia, but anyone that is subscribed under the International Engineering Alliance, because all these qualifications are all benchmarked internationally. So now that I have talked about the pathway to become a chartered an Engineers Australia member, I'm going to be talking about becoming chartered. But just to recap, at any level, especially if your qualification, understanding that you're from the Syrian engineering body, if your qualification is from Syria or from any of the other universities in the Middle East, most likely you may have to go through a stage 1, or you can do the migration skill assessment as a prerequisite to become a member. But if you have graduated from the UK, from the United States, or from Australia qualification, then it becomes the first pathway, which is an accredited qualification or an international accord qualification. All right. So I'm happy to take questions if you have got more, if you need further clarification in terms of how to become a member later on during the Q&A session. But let's move on in terms of time. Now I'm going to I'm going to discuss about the pathway to becoming a chartered engineer. So one of our most prominent aspects of membership is the ability to apply for chartered status. Chartered status is a globally recognized assessment of your competency for ethical and independent practice. Being chartered is a safeguard for your career, especially in a time of global recession such as the current time. When times are tough, people rely on professional qualifications and accreditations that industry trusts. So chartered accreditation has been created by the industry for the industry. Now, I'm going to make a disclaimer here. If you're not chartered, doesn't mean you're not competent. All right, I repeat that. If you're not chartered currently, doesn't mean you're not competent. It just basically means that you have not gone through a formal process that is benchmarked internationally to demonstrate your competencies. All right, so chartered by going through chartered journey is a demonstration of your competency through an internationally benchmarked process to demonstrate it. So for you, it is also a badge of honor that publicly displays your competency and is recognized around the world. Engineers Australia has got 3 post-nominals that you can see right now on the screen: CPEng, CNT, and CNA. What is the difference? Again, remembering the 3 occupational categories that we have. CPEng is Chartered Professional Engineer, CNT is Chartered Engineering Technologist, and CNA is Chartered Engineering Associates. That basically signifies that based on your occupational category, but all 3 of them are chartered. So even though someone is at the occupational level of associate, meaning that they have got only 2 years of qualification in engineering, they can still become chartered under as a chartered engineering associate. By becoming chartered, you're essentially protecting yourself as an engineer by publicly benchmarking yourself against world-class standards, demonstrating that you adhere to a code of ethics, and showing that you maintain a level of currency in your knowledge. It immediately opened doors to meet regulatory requirements for registration, especially in Australia and also some part of the world. For example, it's a great pathway to becoming an RPEQ, Queensland registration for professional engineers, and some states or territories as these regulations come into effect. Remember earlier on, I mentioned that our CPN is also recognized for registration in the state of Qatar through the MME. And Tamir Nagib, Engineer Tamir, will be actually going to explain the process a little bit more following my talk later on. It also helps to future-proof and mitigate the risks of your career and the firm that you work for. More public and private sector organizations are seeking chartered engineers now than ever before. Trusted accreditation can make all the difference in helping you keep or get employment or secure new work. I'm sure you all agree and appreciate by me saying that there is a huge demand currently for qualified professional engineers. So in short, being an engineer, you have plenty of work. Being a chartered engineer, you have plenty of opportunities. This is just to show some of the organizations that we work with in terms of creating the chartered workforce within their organization. You recognize that we are working in a very global environment. As a chartered engineer, your accreditation provides global recognition of your status, either through the international accords that recognize your qualifications, our mutual recognition agreements, which we include the 26 other engineering bodies around the world, as well as the regions that place great weightage on chartered standard. So if you are chartered with Engineers Australia, you can also attain the same chartered standards with other international bodies. So how do you actually become chartered? There are various pathways to becoming chartered, namely 4 of them. Charter status may be granted immediately if you already have a charter status with one of the international engineering bodies that we have an agreement with, such as the bodies in the UK, South Africa, Korea, and so on. Or if you have 15 years of experience, which a quick glance, I believe majority of you on this webinar tonight have that, you may be able to apply through our interview-only pathway. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. And candidates who have completed a Master's of Professional Practice in Engineering through Deakin University will be granted charter status when they complete their qualification. This may be worth considering if you have a minimum of 5 years of experience and are looking to do further studies. Do take up the Masters of Professional Practice in Engineering at Deakin University, Australia, because after you have completed the course, you will then become chartered. But for tonight's talk, we will focus on the standard pathway, which is the pathway majority of the people will go through. So most engineers will use the standard pathway to become a chartered engineer. To be able to use this pathway, you will need to become, firstly, a member of Engineers Australia. Remember, I said that Engineers Australia chartered is a benefit for members of Engineers Australia. And you must be able to demonstrate each of the 16 competencies. You need also to demonstrate that you have got 150 hours of CPD over a 3-year period. You can start preparing to become chartered early on in your career or whenever you're ready to start. The earlier you start your planning, the easier you will find this process. This is just a guide for your planning. It is not a must do. It is just a guide. To start, we suggest you create a project register. Graduates may do this as they go, but for more experienced engineers, you can look back historically because obviously you have got all the years of experience. Keeping a register of your projects and how they relate to the chartered competencies allow you to plan your application and determine the best example for each competency. Ideally, the first column will list the competency. So you can see the numbers 1 to 16 is actually competencies. It's not the numbers of projects, but the competencies. In the second column, you will name each time you finish the project, you will put in the project reference. It is a list against the relevant competencies that the project could potentially demonstrate. So you can keep track of what which project can provide you the evidence for you to demonstrate the competency. And in the third column, list the evidence from that project. Think about what your output for that project was. This could be the formal project outcomes or the working that sits behind. You have done the work that contributes to the project, you can use it. Remember, it must be your work, not your team's work. Your application needs to demonstrate to the standard of a chartered engineer with evidence that is suitably complex in the engineering environment. So this is just a guide for you to keep track and to start your thinking process on how to approach to become chartered. The next step is looking at your continuing professional development requirement. It is also important to plan for your CPD. When you want to make your chartered application, we will ask to see 150 hours of CPD over the last 3 years, which is at least 50 hours in each of the areas of practice. Now, what is area of practice? I'll come to that. At least 10 hours in risk management, at least 15 hours in business and management skills, and the remainder can be a range of activities that's relevant to your career and interests. Now, our CPD is based on an honesty system, meaning that we do not really require you to provide a certificate of completion, a certificate of attendance to prove that you have gone through the CPD. So in a nutshell, even tonight's webinar, you can actually claim CPD. So if you spend 1 hour on this webinar, you can claim 1 hour of CPD. All right, it's that simple. So one of the major perceived roadblocks about CPD is that I do not have enough CPD hours. So that's one of the major roadblocks that I always hear. But in actual fact, as you start to list out your CPD hours, you will realize that you actually have, in fact, more than 150 hours over 3 years period. Now, why do we say over 3 years period instead of 50 hours every year? Because, for example, in the first year, you may be very busy with your work. You may only do 20 hours of CPD. That's all right. The second year, you have a bit more time and you do 50 hours. So 50 plus 20, you already have got 70 hours. And on the third year, you know that you're going to go on chartered. Therefore, you actually boost up your CPD attendance, and you can make it up by having, the rest of it of 100, another 90 hours there, so that you can make up to be 160, or 80 hours make up to be 150. It's entirely okay because we look at the total of 150 hours over the 3 years period. And CPD can be training, events, seminars, your work experience, your self-studies, interest being volunteering on committees or industries, attending webinars, time spent on EA on demand. I told you we have got this platform, the Engineering Netflix. You can actually watch a lot of content over there. Time spent with your mentors, even training, internal organization training, attending project briefings. Anything that has got a learning element can be your CPD. So CPD is what you should be doing naturally across a diverse area. So that's why when you start to sit down and actually look at it, 150 hours is not unachievable unless basically you just go to work and you do nothing else. Then perhaps it may be quite challenging for you to get 150 hours. So how do you track or plan your CPD? So when you record a CPD, you need to show that what you have done and how many hours it took. We make it easy through providing a tool called Online CPD Tracker, which is accessible when you log in as a member. You can track and save your CPD as you do it. We don't ask for evidence, like I mentioned earlier. We don't ask for evidence, and you don't need to provide evidence as well. But you need to list the learning outcomes, which is a couple of dot points of what you have learned from each CPD activity. If you do not want to use the online tool, you can also create a spreadsheet to do it, but basically it should contain the the elements, which is basically what type of activities, where does it fall under? Is it under risk, under business, or under which area of practice? All right. So Mythbuster, just to recap, CPD is expensive. No, it's not. CPD is the only courses and conferences. No, again, it's not anything that has got learning element. And I don't have any proof of CPD activity, so I can't include it. Again, we don't need for you to prove evidence. Okay. So earlier on, I mentioned about 16 competencies. What are the competencies? So these are the competencies that you have to demonstrate in order for you to go through the chartered journey. So the competencies, as we look across the board, there are 16 of them. We have grouped them into 4 core areas: personal commitment, obligation to community, value in the workplace, and technical proficiency. So if you look at it, as a chartered engineer, we only look at 5 competencies under your technical proficiency, which is what you're practicing as an engineer. The other 11 of the competencies are what we term as the soft skills, which is looking at your communication, looking at how you deal with ethical issues, looking at how you engage with relevant community and stakeholders. What we are actually looking for as a chartered engineer is a well-rounded engineer, not just someone that is technically proficient, but someone who is able to communicate and who's able to deal with all the other aspects of the soft skill. So this is where you will be required to demonstrate that you meet these competencies. So the competencies are broad enough to represent every discipline of engineering and can be applied to whichever part of engineering life cycle you are involved in. When you demonstrate a competency, keep in mind it needs to be in the engineering context. All right. So you will be presented with documents like this that would, for example, competency number 4, develop safe and sustainable solutions. What this competency means in practice is what the assessor is actually wanted to determine that you are demonstrating. So that this center column is important and is where you should have a comprehension of what each of the competency means. Think of it as your scope of work. This is what you need to demonstrate. For some competencies, there are multiple points and you will need to demonstrate them all. Make sure you read the first 2 pages of the competency document and pay particular attention to the engineering problems and the engineering activities. The assessors are providing you some tips, and tips here is understand the competencies, talk to colleagues and engineers who have been through the process, focus on what this competency means in practice, and read about engineering problems and engineering activities on page 2 of the chartered document. So the pathway to become chartered on our standard pathway is a 6-step process. Step 1 is a self-assessment. Step 2 is industry review. So step 1 and 2 is where you start to prepare for becoming chartered. Step 3, 4, and 5 is where the work actually happens, where you enroll, you submit your chartered evidence, and where the professional interview will be conducted at the end after you've uploaded all the relevant evidence. And step 6 is talking about reaping the rewards. Okay, so our chartered journey is a 6-step process. Now let's look at the areas of practice. At Engineers Australia, when you first start the chartered process, you'll be able to select which area or areas of practice to become chartered in. You can see here that EA areas of practice that are available with the relevant state registration areas of practice indicated. That is if you want to be registered in the relevant states in Australia. On your chartered application, you can select up to 3 areas of practice which best describe the work you do. It may not be the areas you qualify in, but areas you have specifically trained and worked in. So you can see the area of practice is talking about where you are practicing. It's not talking about your engineering qualification discipline. So it's not about just civil, it's not about structural, it's not about mechanical, electrical, and so on. It's about where you are practicing your engineering. So to be successful in an area of practice, you must be at least spending 30% of your time working in that area. If you're unsure, Select your best guess and discuss with the assessor. You can always change it later. Keep in mind that if you're going to be required to be registered in Queensland, New South Wales, or Victoria, make sure that you select the correct area of practice which allows you to be registered. So we have already have the corresponding area of practice over there. If you need to be registered, just make sure that you refer to the latest documentation from the relevant state registration bodies. So the first step one is self-assessment. The self-assessment is intended as a quick and easy tool for you to assess how you think you are going against the 16 competencies. It's an online tool and it should not take long for you to do. You can see for each competency, there is an explanation of what the competency is and some examples. So this is what the competency is, and here are some of the examples. For each competency, you are asked to rank yourself against whether you're developing, functional, proficient, or advanced. So let's take a look at the ratings. Developing, you are learning, you need supervision to practice at an acceptable standard. So developing is basically for someone who has just graduated, first out of, maybe about 3 years of their career. Functional, you can act independently at an acceptable standard without help or supervision. Someone with, 4 to 6, 7 years of experience. Proficient, your ability to act independently and is recognized at a high standard, and you can train and supervise others. So this will be looking at someone with, at least 7 to 10, 12 years of experience. And advanced, you can lead teams, train others, and act decisively from experience and a very high knowledge base. Anyone with 15 years and above kind of experience. So once you have rated yourself, you'll see a dashboard, which basically over here lists out all the 16 competencies. And then over here will be your rating, whether you're developing, functional, proficient, or advanced. So this is a useful tool for you to understand where you are, and especially for those who are still at the junior or mid-level of the career. You can use this tool as an assessment tool for you and your supervisor, or even for you to gauge where you are as you prepare to be on the chartered journey. So once you are at the level of functional and above in all the 16 competencies, then you can proceed to step 2. Step 2 is what we call the industry review process. It's where you basically get your peers to see whether they agree with your ratings. So why do we want to do that? You select your own reviewer. You select people who knows you. Okay, so your reviewer is someone who is comfortable reviewing your standard of work, which could be a manager, a mentor, or client. They will assess you on everything they know about you, not just a specific piece of evidence. The assessors would like to see you use a minimum of 2 to 3 reviewers for all the competencies. You can use up to 16 reviewers if you want. 2, 1 for each competency. This is a reality check before applying. That you select the reviewers. Your reviewers should be someone who understand and work with you. And you can select one reviewer for one competency, meaning that you have got 16 reviewers in total, or you can select one reviewer for a couple of your competencies. Some of your reviewers may not be engineers at all. For example, dealing with ethical issues, you can select a reviewer who may not be an engineer. It's okay. We look at the relevance of that reviewer for that competency. For each competency, you need to write a couple of sentences about the work that demonstrates the competency and the evidence that you have. Ensure it explains what you did and how it links to why you are competent in that element. Make it easy for us to understand and access. You don't need to elaborate, but you must be honest and straightforward. You should also pay attention to spelling and grammar, because what you write counts towards your communication competency. At this stage, you don't need to provide evidence, but just tell us about it. It's better to provide more details than not enough, but try to be succinct. Don't waste time telling the assessor what the element means, and things like that. Straight to the point. They only care about how you're practicing it. Talk about yourself, what you can do and how you can prove it. Emphasize on personal practices, not collective work. Remember, chartered competency is about you, not about what your team has done. This is a very poor example of a statement for competency number 2. It hasn't answered any questions and won't help the assessors to determine the person's competency. Whereas this is a good example. A good example provides evidence to support their claim, says which level of competency they believe they are at, explains why they are personally competent, gives detail of an example, and says what type of evidence they have to back it up. So depending on your career stage, you may complete your industry reviews in one sitting or over multiple sittings. For graduates, you may complete the reviews over many years. You can do it 1 or 2 times or as many times as you want. Your industry reviewers don't have to be in your current company or even in Australia. You can ask your previous managers, colleagues to act as a reviewer. If your reviewer is a chartered engineer, of course, their comments will hold more weight as they have been assessed at the level of chartered. But it is not essential, like I said, and we also recognize that it may not always be practical. A very important tip, tell your industry reviewer that you are nominating them, because there has been cases where when the assessor have a conversation with the reviewer was totally not aware that they have been selected. So this is just what the reviewer will see, and then the reviewer will also be able to select the 4 competencies, the 4 levels where whether you are demonstrating the rating, developing, proficient, advanced, or at functional level. Of course, your reviewer can also put in some comments, and whatever the reviewer put in comments, the assessor will look at it, and it actually helps to provide more context to your chartered assessment. All right. So after the reviewers have provided their comments, you will be able to see this second dashboard, which is on the left would be your rating, and on the right would be the assessor's rating. As long as both rating is at the level of functional and above, you can proceed to apply for chartered. So that's step 1 and step 2. Now we talk about step 3. Step 3 is basically making your application. Of course, you have to be a member of Engineers Australia. You need to be rated at the functional level or above, and you need to demonstrate that you have 150 hours of CPD over the past 3 years. You need to upload your CV. It's important that your CV should have a minimum of 3 pages and focus on your roles and responsibility with relevant dates so that it shows your career progression. Make sure you also include key achievements and extracurricular activities you've been involved in, such as volunteering for industry committees or professional bodies or making presentations at conferences. Do include all those in. This is just a recap about the CPD. I've already mentioned it has to be 150 hours, 50 hours in each area of practice. Now, if you are picking 2 areas of practice, what does this mean then? It means that you need to have 50 in area 1, 50 in area 2, 10 hours in risk management, and 15 hours in business management. That remains the same. And in total right now, it's not 150 hours, but you need 200 hours of CPD, because 50 hours has to be at your area of practice. This is the application fee for becoming chartered. At this moment, it's at 1,800 over. And if you want to go through a CVI, which is the chartered via interview pathway for those with 15 years and above, it will be around 1,900 over. Okay, so that's step 3. Now we come to step 4. Step 4 is the evidence process. After you have submitted your application, you will receive a phone call from the national assessor. They will discuss the evidence that you have and let you know what to upload to support your application. You need to have the evidence for all the 16 competencies, but you may not need to upload all of them. The assessor will take into account what your industry reviewers have said. Remember the comment from your industry reviewer, what they can gain from your CV. So the more detailed that you have in your CV, the better it is, and how many years of experience you have. You may also find that one piece of evidence addresses a number of competencies, and that's fine. So once you have enrolled, your case is then given to an assessor. The assessor will read through it based on whatever you have already submitted, and then the assessor will have a phone conversation with you to talk to you, to understand what type of evidence, and through that conversation, then they can tell you, okay, I don't need all 16, you can only give me 8, and here are the 8 pieces of evidence that you may have to upload. So that is how our step 4 process looks like. So what is evidence, right? Is we also understand about the confidentiality of evidence. You need to ensure that whatever pieces of evidence that you're going to be upload, you have already taken care of the confidentiality and you have the permission to upload them. Work evidence can be your plans and drawings. Don't give us the whole design. The assessor is not interested in the design. The assessor is only interested in the part that you are doing that demonstrates the competency. So evidence is anything and everything that you have delivered as part of your doing your work. It may be a formal result, a report, a hazard plan, or it could be a calculation that sits behind a drawing or an email trail. If you have done it as part of delivering the project, you can use it as evidence. If you can't prove a piece of evidence, perhaps because it is with your previous employer, you can always write a narrative to explain what you have did, why you did it, and how you have done it. Your evidence must be current. We only accept evidence up to 10 years old. Anything older than that, the assessors will not look at it because of currency. It must also be sufficient. This means the quality of the evidence that helps the assessor to make a decision about your competency in the area of practice that you want to be chartered in. Your evidence must be authentic as it focuses on you, not someone else or a team. It must also be valid that it demonstrates the specific problem, situation, and the piece of work you did rather than a hypothetical or hypothetical situation. Lastly, it must be reliable. This means outcomes are repeatable and not a result of a happy accident. So when you upload your pieces of evidence, you are required to write a few sentences and on why you think it demonstrates the competency and what the assessor should look at in the evidence. So provide the page reference, the paragraph, and things like that. Throughout the process, you can contact the assessor at any time to ask a question. So the process of becoming chartered at Engineers Australia is not a one-way street where you provide everything to the assessor just keeps silent, and then at the end of the day, you go through an exam or you go through an interview, and then the assessor will tell you pass or fail. It doesn't happen that way. We want to have the communication because you tend to learn something also during the journey of becoming chartered. So once you have submitted evidence and the assessor have gone through it and they feel confident that you have meet the requirements, they then will schedule you for a professional interview. The same assessor will be the one who is going to be conducting the interview with you. It's on a one-to-one basis, or sometimes they may bring in a subject matter experts to sit in if it's in an area that's very niche or an area that's outside of the assessor's knowledge. The final stage of assessment is the professional interview. And at the end, usually the interview will be, between 30 minutes to an hour. And it's more of an informal conversation. While your evidence show what you did, the interview gives you a chance to explain why and how you did it. You have the opportunity to do a presentation. Some assessors may request for one. Sometimes they will leave it up to you whether you want to do it or not. So the presentation gives the chance to showcase who you are as an engineer and to justify why you should become chartered. Following a presentation, you will have a discussion about your engineering career, including 2 to 3 significant engineering projects you were responsible for in the past 3 to 5 years. This is an opportunity to authenticate your information and evidence, show your commitment to high standards of professionalism, and demonstrate your understanding of ethical behavior. It is also an opportunity to see the depth and breadth of your engineering knowledge, experience in your requested area of practice, and to explore competencies further. This is some of the assessor's tips. The assessor will discuss the Code of Ethics, Engineers Australia Code of Ethics with you. So be ready to discuss ethical dilemmas that you may have faced. They will also discuss sustainability and safety in designs. So be ready to talk about how you apply these principles in what you do. You may be nervous, but remember, the assessors are there to guide you in the process. They want you to be successful, and they want to have a successful outcome with you. And you'll be told at the end of the interview whether you're successful or not. It's not whether you pass or fail. It's whether, congratulations, you're chartered or not yet. So if congratulations, then of course you will receive your chartered certificate and so on and so forth. Not yet. What does that mean? That means perhaps you were very nervous, you didn't do well in your interview. Perhaps there were some pieces of evidence that the assessor may require you to substantiate further. Therefore, you go back to step 4. And then you know where you provide the evidence, and then after the evidence has been looked at, the assessor will schedule you for another interview, and then you go through the interview. Now, remember earlier on, when you make enrollment, you only make the payment at step 3. So which means that if you are not successful, you still go back to step 4, but you don't have to repay again. So your payment to become chartered is once until you become chartered. That's it. So when your congratulations, when you're becoming chartered, you can share your exciting news. You can also be registered on NER, which is the National Engineering Register, or with that chartered certificate, you will be able to then proceed with the relevant state registration if you require. So your assessment fee already includes it for the registration on NER. So why not just take it? So that is, in a nutshell, the chartered pathway, the standard chartered pathway. So now I'm going to talk about the CVI, because I understand quite a lot of you on the call perhaps is already chartered, or even very experienced engineers. So with that, I just want to talk about a bit about chartered via interview pathway. To be eligible for this pathway, you must have at least 15 years of engineering practice. And if you do have that, what we require from you is that you must provide us with a comprehensive CV that is being verified by 2 referees. The 2 referees are basically someone who knows you, preferably engineers or chartered engineers, right? Someone who knows you and your work, and then send that CV to me, all right, or through Engineers Australia. We will then send it to an assessor for eligibility check. And once we have already checked that, yeah, you meet all the requirements, we will then send you an invitation, because CVI is an invitation pathway, where once you receive the invitation, you will be able to have a self-assessment, which is a manual form, not the one I showed earlier, where you can just write, how you demonstrate competencies and upload your CPD. An assessor will look through that. You don't need to submit evidence, because your CV is your evidence. The assessor, once they are happy with it, they will then schedule you for the professional interview. And the same process of the interview, you will again become chartered. So it's a more comprehensive and streamlined pathway, especially for those with 15 years and above experience. So this is what I talk about, the manual form for self-assessment, where you talk about all the different competencies, and you just have to put the examples and how do you demonstrate it. So the professional interview is the same. It will take about 30 minutes to an hour. They will talk about 2 to 3 significant engineering practice, and it can be a virtual discussion. So especially you're in the Qatar, all our assessors, by the way, are full-time assessors with Engineers Australia. That means they're employed by Engineers Australia. They, of course, they have, most of them are probably semi-retired from the industry. They are no longer working in the industry, and they decided to become full-time assessors. So your interview can be conducted via online, through MS Teams, WebEx, Zoom, whatever platform that's comfortable, and it can be done through video conferencing. So after you've become chartered, regardless of whichever pathway, what do you need to do to maintain your chartership? All you need to do is to maintain your EA membership and to always have the currency, which is having 150 hours of CPD to be demonstrated over 3 years period. And you will be audited every 5 to 6 years. And a team will randomly select, but our chartered professional engineers or chartered engineers to go through an audit for CPD. So you will be audited at least once every 5 to 6 years. And after becoming chartered, you can also be on the international registers such as APAC engineer or international PE at no additional charge. It is free, but you have to meet the requirements of having at least 7 years of experience. So if you are, someone who have just started, oh, by the way, I forgot to inform, before you can start on this chartered journey, you must have at least 5 years of postgraduate experience to be on the standard pathway. All right, to be on the CVI, 15 years, and to be on any of these international registers, you must have at least 7 years of postgraduate experience working, practicing as an engineer. All right, that concludes my presentation. That's my email address, by the way, apung@engineersaustralia.org.au. Before I conclude and move on to the Q&A, I would like to hand over to Tamir. Engineer Tamir, who's going to be talking a bit more about the MME. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and I hand over to Tamir. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Astley, for the presentation, and thank you everyone for listening. I will not take much. I just want to highlight that being chartered with Engineers Australia, actually there is a mutual recognition agreement between Engineers Australia Qatar chapter and the Ministry of Municipality, where our charter status is officially recognized by the Ministry of Municipality, meaning that any chartered member of Engineers Australia applying to be a registered engineer in Qatar is exempted from the ministry's assessment exam administered by the Committee for Accreditation of Engineers and Consultancy Offices. So in a nutshell, when you are registered with Engineers Australia, you are automatically registered with the Ministry of Municipality in Qatar. So I think this is a great advantage for all engineers who are seeking to be a registered engineer here in Qatar. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this outstanding presentation you made to our engineers. I'm quite sure we have a good number of engineers or started planning how to really be chartered engineers soon. And we look forward to maybe having you once again, and Engineer Tamer as well, in other events. And if you visit Qatar, please don't hesitate to let us know so we can have maybe in-person meeting in which we can offer you some good food stuff from our culture here. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and have a good night.